Yes, yes. Welcome to the ancient world of tabletop games. I am Agamemnon, from the historical documentary, Time Bandits. This is a report from a fugitive. This episode sees the return of Shaky Cam to show viewers the cross-mounted camera slider that captures board game play from above. I went hunting on the interwebs for an overhead camera rig. The interwebs sent me to a video by Casey Neistat. I'll provide a link to that studio tour movie at the end of this film. Neistat's improvised overhead camera rig steered me in the direction of making up my own thing. After catching a few videos on camera sliders, I hunted for a cross-mounted slider and 2 tripods to mount the slider on. Luckily, I found just the right rig. It was that or take up woodwork. For international games, it's important to let a player on another continent see any part of the board at a moment's notice. The request for top left, top right, bottom left, central, or bird's eye view drove my mission to create the right sort of framework for hosting games. Keeping cable problems to a minimum is way up there with keeping table problems to a minimum. The entire setup is based on space available around the table. Cables, tripods, and cameras. Oh my! For side sections of the game away from the main board, I'll use a small camera slider. This will focus on players' card hands, character boards, personal counter supplies, and so on. Mostly, that view is for public game knowledge, but there are many ways to cater to private game information for players in other countries. I'm not staring directly at these dice as I remove them from the board. Instead, I'm looking at the second monitor placed just back from the table, checking the camera to ensure the footage is recorded. The main monitor lies behind a wall of bookcases, keeping the noisier computer bits and pieces isolated from the studio microphone. My original Shaky Cam platform, GorillaPod, was set aside in favour of a tabletop tripod. The tripod is built to be handheld with the legs folded and is easier on the hands than the GorillaPod was. But the tripod isn't there for Shaky Cam purposes. It's for tabletop placement over character boards, either on the main table or the side table to the right of the main action. Some games are very busy in terms of components and layout. Here's the small camera slider in action. I made around half a dozen videos before I realized I had camera flicker. The camera's setting in megahertz didn't match the megahertz of the studio light bulbs. That was a quick fix, altering the default setting to line up with the bulbs used. While I was there, though, I saw another setting for a smoother picture, so I added that. It takes away some of the jarring qualities that fly up when moving a webcam, though this comes at a mild cost. Occasionally, the software throws a screen ripple in your direction. Autofocus problems are lessened ever so slightly too, and that means the price of admission, that ripple, is a reasonable fee to pay. I've edited most of the rippling out, but I left enough rippling in just to give you an idea of what's going on. And now, the cross slider in action. Though there is an X slider available from the Portuguese company, Ratrig, the one I cobbled together here is a step up in size. I had 6 feet to move around in, giving me a 5-foot table, so the best option was a 4-foot camera slider rail plus floor space taken up by the tripod legs. 3-point lighting from left, right, and above greatly reduces camera shadows. Though you have to contend with reflective surfaces in that overhead lighting, there's no one-stop solution. Each board game brings its own challenges to the table in terms of play, and the same is true of challenges when filming. Let's talk about gloves. I decided gloves made great props, until I had to wear them. I gave myself more work in picking up cards and moving clunky tokens around in gloves. Still, there's something worth saying about matching gloves to a game's theme. Black gloves go with Dracula, Jack the Ripper, or Darth Vader. I might get away with them if playing Brothers, the game about filling a field with wabbits. We shall see. The other reason for wearing gloves is to avoid continuity problems when filming out-of-sequence segments. Any cuts, bruises or paint daubs to the hands flitter in and out of shot with continuity thrown to hell, distracting. Mostly, though, the gloves are there for thematic purposes. Here's the croupier's rake, dismantled and turned into a pointer. The overhead view isn't enough, given that my guest stars are coming in from all sorts of intergalactic locations. Pointing areas out to guide players, or pointing to things questioned by those players, these are simple enough when everyone is at the same table. Over in the online world, the game could do with a helping pointer, and there's the business of using a prop for more than mere thematic purposes. The watch isn't meant for use in a game, marking the passage of time. It's too reflective on this stand, at that angle, filmed by this particular camera rig. There are ways around that, including reducing the lighting. The watch is there for filming inserts indicating the game turn. All this camera tomfoolery is for nothing if the gameplay goes unedited. Broadcasting raw footage was never part of the plan. Lumbering game explanations for rookie players are easily slashed to a few wise words in a quick insert filmed after the fact, though you should never find yourself giving lumbering game explanations to any players, rookie or otherwise. Instead, I expect rambling explanations with examples of play that needn't make it into the final cut unless they are definitely witty and amusing. The ruthlessness of editing should see half of that supposed wit hit the digital cutting room floor. Expect to see props enter and exit the stage, announcing a rule or a game turn or a dramatic development the players didn't quite take in. This proves likely in games with hunting themes, Letters from Whitechapel or its Whitehall counterpart, Pandemic with a bioterrorist in play, The Fury of Dracula, and anything featuring Sherlock Holmes. Reflective surfaces aside, the visual provided by a pocket watch won't hurt gameplay, not if I angle the lights well enough. Speaking of reflective surfaces, game boards aren't too much of a problem. Thankfully, many boards are matte and not gloss. Here's a glossy example. Perhaps the glossiest board in my possession. I'll explain the presence of the pocket watch in another video on clean game design. Matte or gloss, the same camera layout applies. This board is so glossy you'll catch sight of the camera arm's reflection rather than its faint shadow, and there's nothing worth doing to correct that. I could only paint out the reflection digitally on each frame shot, but this isn't a Hollywood blockbuster. It's just a game about playing as a character in a Hollywood blockbuster. If I bring the lamp in closer, you'll have an idea of the difficulty in lighting a glossy game board from above. Suddenly the moon looms over the ocean and gameplay for overseas participants takes a visual dive. For this reason, the overhead light is more of an overhead but off-to-the-side light. The matte game board underneath offers a different problem. Fortune and Glory is too glossy for its own good. Legends of Andor is perhaps too legendary. Very few game boards are tiny and very few are massive. I'll have challenges filming 2nd edition Arkham Horror and one or two other massive games, the biggest challenge being 878 Vikings. Yes, I bought the jumbo map just for filming purposes. There's that camera ripple I was talking about. It's really a vortex in the space-time continuum, and that is a board gaming fact. I don't quite need another table. That was all checked out before I slapped the money down, obviously. Measure twice, purchase once. There are players who reject games based on the gargantuan boards that will never fit on average-sized kitchen tables. Theme? Fantastic. Gameplay? Awesome. Production values? Immaculate. Size of board? Larger than Olympic swimming pool. Rejected. Next. Even with a large board, it is possible to extend the camera mount just beyond the reach of the sliding arm. I still cover the largest of maps. Players only need to see the area that concerns them at that moment. Another moment comes along and they request a more relevant part of the map. Here the only difficulty arises in going to the bird's eye view. I have to adjust the aerial shot and then put in a second adjustment to be sure of capturing both top corners of this giant map, but it can be done. With the software adjustment smoothing out the trickiest upward moves, the shift to a higher viewpoint, altering the whole rig, camera shake is less of a problem. Another point to using this type of rig is to remove shaking caused by moving items on the table. I thought the setup on tripods back from the table avoided that, but in a few earlier videos camera shake was there in basic moves. Then I realized why. As I walked around adjusting things, I stood on the floorboards and they flexed and affected the tripods themselves. I hope I've cured that problem by treading lightly. The alternative fix is to replace the boards. Can't shift the tripods, fixing the boards is no fix at all, thanks very much. This flexible game board is one of the mattest of matte surfaces. A simple bird's eye shot covers the map area and the planning section. Broadcasting must convey the gameplay to viewers, but before all that, your international intergalactic players must make sense of the action. If players have Tourette syndrome, OCD or dyslexia, it takes a load of tripods and rails and cameras to make the complexity vanish.